Hello, Anna. Hi. Good evening. Goof evening. I like it. Happy Thursday once again. Almost Friday. Welcome back to several of you, and welcome to those of you that have not been here before. We'll give a moment for people to get in here, but hello, hello, hello. You cannot, let's see. Is anyone else having trouble hearing? Okay. So Anna, you may want to try to come back in and then, or go out and then come back in. That usually works for me. It's happened to me before too. That too. Check your volume. Lots of different things. Well, people will trickle in as they do, but I'll go ahead and get started because as I said last week, I like to start on time. Hello, I'm Laura Walton. Once again, hello again to those of you who've been here, and hello, welcome to here if you haven't been here. I'm Laura with Fiveable, and this should be for AP Literature. We're talking literary terms today, and a little bit of review, a little bit of the whys and the hows and whatnot for what we're going to be doing and how to use them on the exam and how they appear. So literary devices. So let's go ahead and get my stuff done. Anna, try exiting and then coming back in. Because this has happened to me before, and then suddenly it did work. I had some trouble actually getting in here a moment ago, but it worked eventually. Sweet. It is presenting. Okay. So today is literary device review, how to use them, some literary devices. A lot of this today is you. I will review some of the ones that you may know, and then some of them that you probably may have never heard of, and then ones that you're like, I need a refresher. And you get a chance today to say if you need something, if you want to go over a particular one. So that's today's, like, ask a question at the bottom. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, there is a lovely button called ask a question. If you have a particular device that you want me to go over that I don't go over by like the time I get to the crazy ones, ask that question. I'll also give some lists today that you can look at that list and say, oh my gosh, I've never heard that. Can you please go over it? Or I'd like a review of what an extended metaphor is. And I'd be happy to do that. Let's get started with some literary terms. Right. Of course, before anything at all, if you are on all of the various social media, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, if you're not already following us at Think Fiveable, you should be. And you will never miss a particular live stream, and you get a lot of information. And if you're not signed up for Fiveable as well, to be able to see these live streams after they happen, go ahead and do that. It is very, very, very much worth it. So that's my plug today. All right, so what we're going to be talking about today, some literary terms review. We're going to play a little game. And that game will be on the screen. So Anna, if you're still having some trouble with you'll be able to see it at least. Figurative language versus literary terms and sound devices. Going to talk about the difference between those things. Why literary terms? Why in the world do you need to use them? Why do we use them? When do we use them? Strategies for learning them and remembering them. So I'm going to give some material. I'm going to talk about some materials today, but I'm also going to, once this is archived on Fiveable, I will have materials that will have lists, like cheat sheets and lists of literary terms for you to go that have the definition and the examples that I will probably give today. Some of the examples are going to come from the top of my head, so those may not be written down, but they'll be in the live stream. And I'll tell you how to use literary devices for AP Lit, so how they look on the exam, and then what you actually have to do with them, both on the multiple choice and on the free response section. And then we'll learn some complex lit devices for fun and enjoyment with all of your friends and family. Annoy your friends and family by telling them about literary devices. My family loves to hear it. They don't really. All right, let's play a game though. Are you ready? Would you like to hear the rules of the game? It's kind of a game. So So this will require, this is just you guys typing in the chat. So what you want to do, I'm going to do this in 2 parts. I will put up an example of a literary, not the literary device itself, but an example of the device. An example that would be like found in a book or so. And you're going to tell me the device. There's no word bank. There's nothing. But the ones for this game are ones that you probably have learned from, I don't know, from middle school on. So not all of them are like that, but most of them are. So this is really a review more than you learning these again. But if you're learning them again, also not a bad thing, because sometimes we blank out in class. So it is perfectly okay if you don't remember all of these, because there are literally hundreds of literary devices that you could remember. So don't feel bad if you don't remember something. Do I have tangible prizes? No, I give high fives. So if you want that, you want to fake touch my hand, you can do that. All right. So you're going to type what the literary device is. And I will also say that some of these have more than one literary device that can be attached to it. So if you see someone put imagery, you're like, well, that's personification. Well, you can put that too, because it might be 2 of those things. All right, let's do this. So the first part is me giving examples. The second part's going to be me giving the devices, and I'll tell you about that afterwards. So here we go. So our first example is number 1. The wind whistled as the trees danced. So what literary devices or device is being used there? Aha! Yes, beautiful. Personification is one of those devices. Anyone else got another one that a literary device being used in there? Yeah. Well, yep, as the tree. Well, it's got an as in. It's not a simile because it's not comparing the wind to the trees, but I like that eye. We got some sound device in there. Hyperbole, not quite exaggeration. It could be exaggeration, but I wouldn't call that hyperbole too much. Looking at sound there. Did I see? No, I did not see that. Okay. What is it called when you use the same consonant sound or use the same sound repeated in the phrase? There we go. We got alliteration in there. Good job, Diego. Sweet. All right, so those are ones, and you could also say imagery for this one too, but personification is the one I really wanted in there. For those of you that are like, oh God, what's personification? Again, don't feel bad, anything like that, because again, you may not remember everything. It is doing things that, giving characteristics of a human to something that is not human. So wind doesn't whistle like a human, but it's whistling here, and the trees don't dance like people. Trees dance is a better example of that. All right, let's do the next one. Number 2, my love is a red rose. What you got? What literary device? Yes, we have a metaphor. Beautiful. You're not seeing the like or as there, and a metaphor, remember, must compare 2 unlike things. Even though in our head we might think, oh, red rose is lovely, and it is like love, it's not really like love is intangible, whereas a rose is perfectly tangible. You can touch it. My love is a red rose. So high five to those of you who got it. Good job. Appeal to emotion. Okay, all right. Ooh, we're getting fancy here. Yeah, sure. That is definitely an appeal to emotion. It makes you empathetic or sympathetic, depending on if you're feeling it or not. Cool. And if you want to get really simple, it could also technically be imagery, but it's more metaphor. And if you saw it on the AP exam, you would want to say it was a metaphor. Cool. Yes, and it could be alliteration because you got that red rose. Well done. So you want to look for as much as you can. All right, let's do the third one. Diamonds quivered on stalks of grass. Yeah, definitely imagery. Little bit of personification because you got some diamonds quivering. And this one would also depend on what you're talking about. So if it was literally diamonds finding on the grass, first of all, I wish I would go into that field and find it so I could grab the diamonds. But if it's not, the diamonds are something else, what would that be? I guess if the diamonds were describing like dew, then that would be like a metaphor there. So it could be that, but this is not clear from that sentence. So it could be literally diamonds quivered on the stalks of grass. So yeah, we got lots of imagery and a little bit of personification there. All right, let's do another one. Her eyes are as black as coal. Now that's one you generally get like in middle school. Yeah, you got a simile. Well done. So there's where the as is doing the comparison there. So unlike the first one where it has as the trees dance, that's just describing the thing that's happening. As here is doing the comparison between eyes and coal. So it has to make a comparison in order to be there. Yeah, it probably would be hyperbole as well because wow, your eyes are really, 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 really dark. And that would be a little scary, especially if you didn't have an iris and it was just like these black eyes there. That's terrifying. Oh, good. Fantastic, Anna. Good, good sound. Yes, so it could be hyperbole as well. But the main one there would be simile. All right, let's see number 5. The cool cat constantly cowered in the corner. What you got? What you got? Yeah, tons of alliteration. How many of you are like at your computer like, oh, someone's getting it faster than I am? Which is not really like, this is not really a competition, but it kind of is, but it's not. Yeah, exactly. Rebecca, I'd be doing the same thing. Like, oh my gosh, I want to be faster. Yeah. Here, high five for everybody's doing it. There you go. All the high fives. All right. And so that one's mainly alliteration. You could go again, say imagery with the cat cowering and whatnot. But the main thing in there, if it's on the exam, they're going to be pointing out alliteration. So remember, alliteration is repeating of usually consonant sounds, but I think it's an umbrella term for repeating any sound because there's consonants and assonants, which I'll go over later. All right, let's do the next one. Oh, and by the way, if I say something and you have a question that is not like, oh, I want to know this literary term, and you want me to clarify, click the ask a question as well, and I will get to it. Especially if it's like specific to this part or a particular part we're on, ask the question and I will stop and answer. All right, number 6, their arms adore your appearance. Oops, no, not number 7. Don't look at number 7. Their arms adore your appearance. This one may or may not. Yeah, okay, personification. So the arms don't really adore you, sure. Metaphor, it's not exactly comparing it to something unlike itself. But I would say personification, and there's a sound device in there, and this is one that a lot of my students didn't know until I told them, so it's okay if you're like, what? This is a sound device? It is like alliteration, and there's a specific kind of alliteration it is. I want to see if anyone happens to know it. If you don't, it is okay. I'll give you like 10 seconds. And I'll type it in here too, but it'll also be typed. Ooh, onomatopoeia. I love that word. It is not onomatopoeia. Yes, very good, Anna. It is assonance. Fantastic. So assonance is the repeating of vowel sounds specifically. And I will say consonants. So consonants is easy to remember because it's consonant sounds. Assonance a little harder to remember unless you have a weird sense of humor like me, which you probably do. Haha. Then you can remember something. I don't know, come up with some mnemonic. But assonance is what it is. Cool. Good job. But also, like I said, personification works here too. All right, let's do the last example one, and then we have another thing. It was a dark and stormy night. The worst first sentence for a piece of literature. Yeah, we got some imagery. Dark and stormy night. There's actually a contest that you can enter, or at least a long time ago, but I'm pretty sure it's still around, that it's called the Dark and Stormy Night contest, where you write like the worst story that you can with that first sentence, because it's just a cliche, terrible sentence, apparently. I didn't think it was that bad. So this one too can go with, so imagery is the big thing here, and what you can also think of it as it's setting up a mood. And so my question to you is, what mood is it setting up? Yeah, scary. What else? Tense, definitely. Yeah, eerie, spooky. Yeah, if you were to say something like cheerful, I don't know what world you live in, the Addams Family or something, but that's not it. Yeah, dark. Ominous. Ooh, yes, we're getting fancy. Yes. So good words there. So yeah, so there's that one's a mood one too. And you could really talk about the mood or tone with any of the sentences, but that's the one that I was really setting up there. So cool. All right, so my next one is the same kind of game, but instead I'm going to give a word So, or I'm sorry, I'm going to give a literary term, and you're going to give me an example of that literary term. So it can be from your own brain. Um, if you have the time, you can go look for it, but these are not ones that are, you don't have to find like Shakespeare or anything like that. So we'll see what you come up with. And some of them are the same from here. Okay, here we go. Here's our first example. Onomatopoeia. Give me an example of onomatopoeia. This one is less of a speed one and more of how creative can you get? Moo, good. Animal sounds. Bam, yes, all the Batman noises basically. Woof. Yes, whoosh. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, the Batman noises, if you've ever seen the really old comics, first of all, do yourself a favor and go look at them. They're hilarious. Second of all, it's got this like all the ones that are like bam, pow, zip, zang. Car. Whoosh. Zoom. Yes. Lots of yes. Beautiful. All right. So yeah, lots. So an onomatopoeia is oh yeah, okay, and that's an interjection as well for ouch. Excuse me. So just as a reminder, so onomatopoeia is our sound words. So it can be animal sounds, it can be object sounds, it can be kind of words that are not words when you say them. Like something like ouch could yeah, I would say it could constitute as an onomatopoeia, but it's mostly the sound words like boop. That's one. So if you boop someone on the nose, that's onomatopoeia too. All right, let's do another one. Rhyming couplet. Let's see how well you rhyme. It could be the worst thing you've ever written, and I can't wait. And if I don't see anything, then I'll remind you what it is. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need to be Shakespeare here. And this will take a little bit longer, so I'll just look here. This lovely, lovely orb. That cat is on a red bed. Okay, so you got some rhyme in there. Daisy is lazy and very crazy. Okay, so I would say a car and a bar is like, say, y'all have a bunch of rhymes. Okay, so as a reminder, so rhyme and couplet. I ate on a date. Cool. So I would say, so I'm going to go with I ate on a date. So if you were going to do I ate on a date, a rhyme and couplet is two separate lines of poetry that rhyme with each other. So a couplet is, so if you take out the rhyming part, couplet just means two lines of poetry. So then the rhyming couplet is the two lines that rhyme. So if I said I ate on a date, yes, there we go. She was a little tense. The notice made no sense. Awesome. Are we going to stay in the seat or are we going to break free? So I would say the or would go on the next line and you got some half rhyme there. So yeah, seat and free. Yeah, so rhyming couplets don't have to be perfect rhymes. In fact, a lot of times with the older poetry, they're not. So it's really fun when you find that on the AP exam. Okay, cool. So two lines, separate lines that rhyme with each other, and they're right next to each other too. All right, next one. Foreshadowing. This one also takes a little bit longer, but not too long. So you can give me an example of something that would foreshadow something else. So like something that sets up a mood for something is fine too. Or an omen of some sort. Once again, I'll look gazingly, that's not a word. I will gaze upon this orb as I wait. From Gold's Gym. Yes, Stacy, don't open that. Oh my gosh, horror movies are great. Oh, beautiful. Yes, so Stacy, don't open that door. Foreshadows, that something bad's behind the door. It was getting late at night and a stranger started following me. Yeah, that's setting up a mood of the stranger's probably going to do something, or at least you think they are. Nothing is going to happen. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Usually foreshadows that something will go wrong. A storm in literature generally is going to foreshadow some bad stuff happening, even though the storm is usually the bad thing too. All right, let's do another one. Personification. What you got? Stacy, don't open that door. That's great. Ah, yeah, the dog smiled. So that's creepy. I just had this horrible cartoon image in my head. What else you got? The wind howled in the night. Beautiful. The river opened its arms toward me. Oh, these are wonderful. Y'all are poets. I love it. And then I asked the cow, how come you can't talk? And he said, because I can't. Yeah, definitely. The flowers danced in the gentle breeze. Beautiful. The wind slapped him back into reality. That's amazing. Yes. Excellent. Y'all know your personification. So as a reminder, so personification again is giving non-human things characteristics that humans have or things that they can do. All right, let's do speaker. So this one, think of something you've read and think about who the speaker is. So, and you might be like, why is she asking about speaker? But the speaker is so commonly used on the AP exam. It's like, and sometimes it's hard to find that speaker. So think about what you're reading and tell me who the speaker is. Or a show that's narrated by somebody, but ideally a book. So I like, yeah, I'll wait for you, actually. I will not give my example. And it can be, it does not have to be a complicated AP book either. It can be Harry Potter. Who's the speaker? Although that's a speaker that's a little harder to say. I guess one of the easier ones would be like, so that's point of view. So yeah, so when you're thinking of speaker, you want to find that point of view too. So I guess this one's kind of weird to make you do. So I get, yeah, and I would have to know, like, if everyone is reading the same book, it would be easier to do. So let's see, how many of you, let's actually do an example. So if you have read The Hunger Games, who is the speaker in the book? And this one's easier with first person narration. Yeah, so Katniss is our speaker. Whereas versus Harry Potter, the speaker is third person, so it's not Harry Potter, it's some other entity that apparently follows Harry Potter really closely around. Or in a poem, the speaker might be a different character, it could be the poet. In an autobiography, who is the speaker? Not a trick question. So if I wrote my autobiography, who's the speaker? Yeah, me. Yes, the author. Good. The person who it's about. Beautiful. That is if, of course, I'm writing, I went to the store and did, although I wouldn't write that in my autobiography. That's super boring. But yes. Good. So speaker. So speaker is intrinsically tied to point of view, which is the things like first person, I, second person, you, third person, she, he, it, they. All right. I think I have two more. Okay. Give me some tone words. What you got for tone? And you already gave me, so you gave me some mood words. Mood words are also a lot of times tone words as well. Yeah, depressing tone. So the author is depressed about a subject. Sad. The author can be sad. Cheerful. Okay, I would say cheerful is more goes with it because the author can be cheerful about something. Anticlimactic. Okay, yeah, tone. Yeah, I would say that. Formal, yes. Yeah, definitely. Formal tone. So for tone, and the difference between mood and tone, and these are often conflated, yes, bitter. So I always like to think of tone as more thinking words, whereas mood is more feeling words. Because the tone is tied to how the author feels about something, whereas mood is the item, the thing you feel as you're reading it. So the author could be romantic towards something, but more likely you'll feel a romantic mood than a tone. So tone would be like the author is being sarcastic. The author is bitter towards this subject. Oh yeah, there we go, Diego, sarcastic. You said it before I did. Well done. Okay. All right, let's see if you remember this last one. Archetype. If you don't, that's okay. I love teaching archetypes. Yes, the hero. Evil witch. Oh, Diego knows his archetypes. Excellent. Let's see what else you got. There's, just like literary terms, there's literally hundreds of archetypes. Yes, so these are all, yes, antagonist, definitely. So like enemy or person who's against the protagonist. Charmful villain. Yeah, the one that's really charming. Are there place archetypes as well, or situational, or like symbolic archetypes too? Let's see what else you got. A bully. Good. So as people are putting those up, so in case you don't remember or have not learned archetypes, yes, the princess's castle, beautiful. So an archetype is a universal symbol. It's something that no matter what culture you're from, no matter where you are in the world, you will recognize this archetype. A hero might look different in China than it would look in the United States, but there's still a hero archetype. Wise man, and a lot of them are people archetypes, but there's also situational archetypes like the hero's journey. So that's the hero going on a quest to save something or to come back with a gift. It can also be buildings, like if you're into any sort of tarot or you know about that, like things like the tower or things like death. Those are archetypes that are also, those are ideas that are come throughout people's cultures. So archetypes are really cool. There are huge lists. That can be one of the resources I use because I have a huge list of archetypes. But they're also, it's really cool. There's a lot of resources about that online. So if you haven't done a lot of archetypal research, I suggest you do. Read some Joseph Campbell. He's really cool. It's sometimes a little dated, but he's done a lot of research on it. It's awesome. Okay, cool. So we're going to go over so that's it for our first game, our game here. So thank you for playing. High five to everybody. So let's talk about the difference between literary device, figurative language, and sound devices and some examples. And then when you see examples up here, so this isn't about me explaining them, but if you see something up here you've never seen before, or you're like, I really need to know what that is, or I need a review, once again, go to that bottom and ask a question and I will go over it. I also used really creepy boo on this today, so hope you like that face. So what is a literary device? What is figurative language? Here's the difference between the two. So I know that when I first taught, I used them interchangeably, and that was not correct. But it's not the end of the world if you mix them up. So figurative language is going to be specifically language that is used to create an image figuratively. What a great definition that is. Yes, or personification is a type of figurative language, Rebecca. So yes, figurative language is very similar to personification, right? Yes, it is. It is a type of figurative language. So figurative language basically describes something often without directly stating what it is or isn't. So it's something that you're not writing a scientific paper about something, you're describing it in a way that puts an image in somebody's mind. And you're using those devices to do so. So that is not the button I'm supposed to press. So examples, when you're using figurative language to use to describe things like a field, instead of being a scientist and saying, the field is green, the field has exactly 2.5 billion blades of grass and is made of dirt, you would say the field is like those things we got, the diamonds glowed on the field as I walked through it and the wind whipped my hair. So you're using more, it doesn't have to be that flowery, of course, but you're using figurative language to describe it rather than scientific or straightforward language in order to get a sort of effect. If you use just straightforward language, it turns out sounding like a scientific paper. Same thing with a lover. Like if you really like somebody, you don't just describe like, okay, cool, my girlfriend is white and she has brown hair and she has brown eyes and that's it. No, usually when you have like a girlfriend or boyfriend or something, you describe them in such a way, oh, they're perfect and they're a king and they're a queen, and you use all these metaphors to describe them. You use figurative language when you really like somebody. And same thing with intangible stuff like love. So we use figurative language to describe things that we can't touch or we don't have scientific ways to really describe it. You can describe the physical symptoms of love, but you don't. That's not love. We use poetry to describe love. Yes. So that's figurative language. So those are using things to describe either what it isn't or using kind of like roundabout ways to describe what it is. Whereas a literary device is like an umbrella term. So they're structures used by writers to convey ideas to readers. So figurative language is types of literary devices, but not all literary devices are figurative language. Figurative language. Blah. So like I just said that, oops, and that's it. So it's just the big term. So the things that I'll show you some examples of what these are. So this is the time. I'll show you a big fat list of all three of these things. There's not three on here, but there's going to be a third one. If you see things, again, ask the question, I need to know what this is, or I'd like to. I'm going to go over some of these at the end too. So examples of figurative language types are things we just played a game with: metaphor, simile, imagery, personification. Some of you mentioned, and hyperbole. There's other ones too, and this is not an exhaustive list whatsoever. There's literally hundreds of figurative language types. We have extended metaphors. That's a metaphor that extends throughout the entire work or throughout a very large chunk of a work. Epic simile threw my kids off a couple years ago because they saw it on the AP exam, like a practice test, and they're like, what is that? And don't panic, it has simile in it. It still compares with like or as. It's just epic means big. Like the way that you probably use the word epic, if you still use that word. What else we got here? Cool. So it looks like, hopefully I answered your question. What is an extended metaphor? So actually we'll put that on the question. Yes. Good. Yes. Cool. So we have to, so I'll go ahead and answer that once again. So I got two questions. That is, what is an extended metaphor? So that's a metaphor that it extends throughout a poem or throughout a novel or a big chunk of whatever those are. So an extended metaphor might extend through a stanza of a poem or the entire poem, or the extended metaphor might extend through a chapter or a paragraph of a novel or a scene of a play. So that is extended metaphor. Okay, yeah, we're getting some good ones. So yeah, so I see some other questions, so I will get to those later on. Very good. All right. Yes, you are welcome. Okay, I'm going to leave that up for just about 10 more seconds. So if you're looking at that, you're like, what the heck is that? Ask it. And I will, when I see the question, I will not, if you're like, I don't want my name to be seen or anything, although I think everyone can see, but I won't say your name, I'll just say what the answer is. So don't feel, no question is a stupid question. And again, not everyone learns the same way or learn the same stuff in school. So if you didn't see some of this stuff, ask it. Okay, cool. So those are figurative language types. Again, not an exhaustive list. Yeah. So we got some literary terms, but these are not necessarily figurative language. A lot more because it's an umbrella term, and I bet more of these on this list are ones that you haven't seen before. So tone, mood, theme, motif. So we just did tone and mood, and theme is a general idea in a text. A motif is something that is repeated throughout, it's like a theme, but it's like an image or something that is repeated throughout a text. I bet I'm going to get a lot more questions with this. Yes, I knew it. Awesome. Let's see if I can explain any of these more quickly than just when I'm going through them. Yeah, these are a lot of stuff. I bet you have not seen zoigma, stickomythia. You may have seen non sequitur before. I know that I had not until, I don't think I saw non sequitur until college. So y'all are getting some advanced stuff. Yeah. Yes. Oh yeah. Oh good. So we're getting some of the same questions too. And remember on here too, when you see a question under the question box, that you can upvote a question so it goes closer to the top. But I'll go through it, as many as I can, which I have not yet gone through every question that I've gotten. So we'll go through some of those today. Some of them I'm going to go over whether you like it or not. Ooh, okay. Okay, give you about, and I will add your question to the question box. Beautiful. Okay. All right, and I got one more. So if you got a question, ask the question. Okay, so then sound devices in poetry. So sound devices are still types of literary devices. I just separate them because they're almost always used with poetry. It depends on what it is, because alliteration can obviously be used in a prose form, but they're most often used to describe poetry. I'll just go through this because I don't know I have this like this. Okay, so these devices describe the sounds of words in a phrase in a piece of literature and how they relate to each other. So things like rhyme and rhythm or meter is a sound device. So on the AP exam, sometimes they'll ask you what sound. They usually won't directly say, but you can say you can use such things as sound devices to describe this. They're talking about things like rhyme and rhythm or meter, like saying iambic pentameter. And as a reminder, iambic pentameter is when you have 5 feet, which is like it's going to end up usually being 10 syllables, and then the stress syllables on the second one. I could go through an entire live stream talking about meter, but I can also shorten it. And then you got the alliteration, assonance, and consonants, what we had talked about, and onomatopoeia, and enjambment, which I'm going to see if anyone's asked about that. And if they haven't, I'm still going to answer it anyway. Okay. So enjambment is when, in case you haven't learned enjambment before, is when you have 2 lines of poetry, might be more than 2 lines, but you got 2 different ones, and that means that the line before finishes on the second line. So it's like a whole thought is done in 2 lines or more. So this is what often trips people up when they're reading Shakespeare, because when we read poetry, we like to read it line by line. That's not always helpful, especially with Shakespeare, because it's not line by line he's writing to punctuation, and he's just writing in iambic pentameter. But a lot of poets will do the same thing. They will finish a thought on the next line. So that's enjambment. That just means the phrase ends on another line besides the one that is there. If I did not answer that very well, please ask it in the questions and I will explain it in another way. But I also just saw a question in here that is not necessarily a device question. Okay. So the question here is, on the AP exam, will we have to memorize what each literary device does? Like I said, there's hundreds of literary devices, so you're not going to be able to memorize every single one. I haven't. I still see ones today that I'm like, what the heck is that? But you do want to have a pretty good body of knowledge of a lot of literary devices. So it is in your best interest to know literary devices. You can get away with knowing the simple ones really, really well. But I'll show you later on too in this live stream how it might appear in the test and how they'll use some complicated ones to how they'll appear in the test. So not memorizing stuff, not having a large body of knowledge for that, maybe it's sometimes to your disadvantage. So you want to study them. So I'll give you some advice on how to do that. So hopefully I answered that pretty well. Let's see if I got any others before I move on. All right. Oh, cool. Got that one. Nice. All right. So those are sound devices. You are welcome. Always, always. I am going to drink some water because I'm running out of... So good. You can look at Mario while I do this. So why do I need to care about literary devices? I imagine you know the answer to this question because you're here. You're like, I kind of care about them, so I'm here on this live stream, spending my wonderful Thursday evening with Laura Walton. So why do I need to care about literary devices? But I'll tell you how they look on the exam. So number 1, and this is remembering what the AP literature class is for in the first place. Is not just to take an exam, it's for lots of different skills that you'll use later on as well. So number 1, it is literally impossible to speak or communicate without literary devices. The thought you are thinking right now has some sort of literary device. It has syntax, usually we think in metaphors. That's just the human condition. We think in imagery, like if you're looking at anything, your brain is putting images in your head and you're describing it that way. So we use literary devices all the time. We just don't necessarily know the words to describe those devices. Number 2, directly stating everything is really, really boring. There is a place and a time to use those things, to use direct stating, like again, in a scientific report, we just need to know the facts, or in a governmental, anytime you go to like writing down politics and things with that, it's going to be very straightforward and directly stated. Metaphors will kind of conflate what things are happening, but it's not a style found in most serious literature, and we don't read books that are directly stating things to us all the time, unless you're really trying to get the facts, because it just tends to be like, okay, great, so give me another way to say that. That's why we have cliches, and that's why your teacher doesn't like them. Number 3, new concepts are learned through metaphors, similes, and the like. So the way that we discover new things is how we use metaphors to be able to discover those new things. So for example, I'm going to use the science example again. If you discover a new bug, then you use metaphors or similes, like this bug is like a spider in this way, or so the way that you get people to understand something is by using figurative language. So they're like, oh, it's like this thing. So they have an idea. It takes you less time to describe it. Literary devices allow you to take less time and energy to describe something. And finally, remember that AP literature is not just about reading well, it is about writing well as well. So your writing is stronger, more mature, and more interesting when you can use expert literary devices. Even in your essays for AP literature, you can use literary devices in them. So you want to have a good knowledge to do well in the exam, but also just to write better in college and beyond too. How many of you are writers? You write for fun, like you write poetry, you write essays, you write in a journal, or you write short stories. You get at least some of you, because I think a lot of people do like to write creatively. I do. Cool. Yeah. Poetry for fun in a journal sometimes. I want to update my journal more often than I do. And I also write poetry, or I wrote poetry in the past. I have not written poetry in a while, which is a bit of a shame. Perhaps after this, I will be inspired. So we got one poet here. I'll see if you have another answer to the anyone else who writes, you can put it there, or you can just hide in your hidey hole and pretend like you don't write. Okay, cool, neat. How are devices used on the AP Lit exam? Glad you asked. So on the multiple choice questions, this is what they might look like. What literary device is being used in the phrase blank? And they'll give you a phrase and you have to pick the literary device. So that one's probably the most straightforward one. Those don't appear as often as the last one I'll show you. These ones sometimes appear, but these are not as common either. So which of the following example of, let's say, alliteration or an example of metaphor? Also not particularly common, but it has been on there before. They will give you a phrase and it'll kind of flip it backwards. This phrase is a metaphor that compares what to what, and it'll ask you what the metaphor is actually saying. What does the author compare blank to in the following literary device? Usually metaphor. So asking you what is actually being compared. And this will usually be done with more complicated text. So if it's something more straightforward, they won't ask you this, but if it's something like Shakespeare or something similar to that time period, they'll ask that. And then finally, this is a really common one. What is the purpose of this literary device in the passage? And that question frame might not be exact, but that's one of the actual types of multiple choice questions. That is, what is the purpose of this? So it's not just asking what the literary device is why is it being used? Let me check my questions. Let's see if there's anything. Okay, all right, we'll go back to that. All right, so that's multiple choice questions. So that's what it looks like. So some tips for using those literary devices in multiple choice. So number one, don't freak out at unfamiliar choices. So almost always done those laundry lists of, and I'll show you an example in a moment, on this laundry list of literary devices, they're going to put one on there that's going to throw you off, like stichomythia. Like, what the heck is that? Don't freak out, because a lot of times the simplest answer is the answer. Sometimes it's the complicated answer. So that brings you to number two, use process of elimination. So if it's not any of the other ones, like it's listed there, personification, alliteration, metaphor, extended metaphor, and you got stichomythia, and it's none of those other four, then pick the one that you don't know. But for the most part, it's going to go with what you know. Study your literary devices. So again, I will have resources like cheat sheets for you to look at, and internet is great for just looking at a huge list of literary devices. Learn new ones. Keep a vocab journal. That's one of the resources I also do. That means that if you see a literary device you're not familiar with, you write down the word, you write down the definition, you write down an example of it, and you write your own example. So that's a vocab journal. And I will show you what I mean by the last one is cover up the adjectives and modifiers in the answer choices. So I'll show you what I mean on that. But I'll tell you that a lot of times in an answer, when they're talking about literary devices, that the adjectives confuse the crap out of people. But if you know the literary devices themselves, you can ignore most of the adjectives. So I'll show you what I mean. So this is an actual question from an old AP exam. So, and it's a poem that was there. It doesn't matter what the poem is. We're just practicing doing this. So the question was, lines 22 and 23 are based on which of the following? And then you see all these answers. Now, question for you, give me an emoji that says, what's your feeling when you see all these answers here? No, like a completely blank face. Like, what is that? Oh, I love it. We got 2 more. Oh, okay, we got a little bit of a smile. Like, oh, I know some of those. That's good. Any others? Ha! Like the kind of frowny face, but like, like discomfort. Yep. Okay, Anna, see, I have that reaction to it. Anger. Yes. Feel the anger. No, don't feel the anger. Although it'll keep you awake, so. So, the trick is here, you look at these things, you're like, paradoxical hyperbole, what the heck? So when I say cover up the modifiers, I mean ignore the first word in all of those answers. I'm putting my hand up here, that's me covering up my screen. But so look at just what the devices are. So hyperbole, metaphors, syllogism, reasoning, irony. You can automatically take some of the answers out because let's say, okay, this isn't an example of reasoning, it's not an example of irony, and it's not an example of metaphors. So then you're choosing between, instead of paradoxical hyperbole, you're just choosing between hyperbole and syllogism, and then you have an easier time finding that. Now, in this case, of course, this is a case when if you know what a syllogism is, then you have that was not actually the answer to the question. That was a trick. So C was a tricky answer. I believe the answer was actually paradoxical hyperbole, but you would have known that if you only knew hyperbole. Paradoxical wasn't actually very important there. So that is one tricksy way. I saw that I think a couple years ago, so they still do that, which kind of stinks, but that's one trick for you. Okay, so if you got any questions about multiple choice, which actually I will check because I see an extra one. Okay, we got syllogism. Cool. We'll go back to that. Yay, smile. So free response is, you'll see this most often, you'll most often use literary terms to help you describe a theme and its relation to the work as a whole. Sometimes they'll give you a laundry list of literary devices. So you may use syntax and imagery and diction in your answer. You can choose whether or not to use these. You can use whatever you want, as long, and I'm going to say this not a million times, that's forever, that's hyperbole. You need, and I'll say it again for the folks in the back, you need to use literary devices in your responses. If it asks for it, you better use it. You have to find those devices in there, and you have to find examples in order to do well in the free response. So you got to know your literary devices to do well. All right, looks like we got some questions. Unless there are... Could just be, nope, okay, we just have the same questions. Cool. Okay, so that's free response. I think that's a little bit easier to do than the multiple choice, because the multiple choice will ask you about specific ones, whereas this one, you just have to, if you know, you can get away with, and I say that like you're getting away with something, but you're not really. You can do really well with just using imagery, metaphor, simile on something, on a particular passage, and do quite well on your free response, as long as you know it really well and describe it well. So that's where your good writing comes into play. Okay, so that's free response. What do we got here? All right, neato. Yay, Princess Peach. So then how do I use devices on the AP exam, and what are some cool, weird literary devices that I might use? So I'm going to go through this more quickly because I want to get to your questions. So when you use a literary device on the exam, so we're going to go through super quickly with this part. So an example, they may ask you to use imagery and diction to describe tone. So the prompt is, so the prompt, they will give you a reading for this. And this example was, I'll just read the prompt and I'll tell you what the reading was. So write an essay in which you describe the attitude of the writer towards his mother and cremation. This is a super old one. Using specific references to the text, show how Shaw's diction and use of detail serve to convey this attitude. So, and the text was, George Bernard Shaw went to his mother's cremation and watched it happen, and the imagery in there was actually quite positive. I'm not happy that she was dead or anything like that, but like he thought of it as being something like she was moving on to the next life. So it has very positive imagery. You may not have you would hopefully pick that up from the diction that's used. So when you get a question like that, you have to use literary devices to answer this. You want to determine your tone. You want to pick out the diction and imagery examples that show the tone from the passage. So as you're planning your essay, you're picking them out and marking what they are. And then you're describing how those examples show the tone. So you've got to make sure you're not just saying this is a metaphor, but you're saying this is a metaphor that describes this tone that says this thing. So you have to, you have to move through the whole question. You can't just point out that it's a literary device. Blech. So then the student example this is written, remember, during the exam. This is an actual student sample that was released ages ago. So you can, and it doesn't have to, it's something that was written in the 40-minute period. So it's like, it's not perfect diction. It's not perfectly like eloquent, but it does answer the question. So you would say you pick out the words. Straw uses words such as wonderful, clean, cool, and sunny to describe the furnace. He does not do this to sound crazy, but to show where his mother is going is not a bad place. He is using the furnace to show his mother's entrance into heaven. And then the specific example again, words such as sunny, miraculously, and beautiful all connote a heavenly aspect to the reader's mind. And they would keep going with this. But so you're using that literary device to show tone, not just saying there are literary devices, but this literary device has this purpose. That makes sense. I see some questions. What we got? Okay. So, all right, cool. So I got a question here that says, would your score decrease if your thesis is incorrect? So it depends on what you mean by your thesis being incorrect, but if your thesis is not, what I'm going to assume here is that you mean that it's not answering the question or that it is not interpreting the passage correctly. And the answer is yes, your score would decrease. You do have to interpret the passage correctly. So making sure the first thing that you want to do with reading anything is to understand the meaning of a text and then move from there. And one of the easiest is not the word I'm looking for. One of the best ways to do that is to look for tone first and foremost. And that helps you understand the author's purpose. And so that helps you understand what the meaning of the text is. So let me know if did not answer that, ask it again. Let's see if we got any more that are not questions about what they are. Okay, cool. Very good question. Very, very good. All right, cool. So let's go through some weird, cool, complex devices, but I want to answer your questions first. So some of them I'll answer in here, and then some of them I'm just going to answer like off of my notes and head. So the first one I'm going to answer is, what is conceit and pastoral? So a conceit, so these are not exactly the same thing. A conceit it's usually an extended metaphor of two extremely different objects. So it's a metaphor that compares two unlike things with each other. A conceit compares two very unlike things. So an example of that is there's a poem by John Donne that's called The Flea, and he compares his love and himself to the flea. So a conceit is done to a humorous extent. So it's so absurd that you're supposed to laugh. Although right now today, most people don't laugh at John Donne unless you're an English teacher. So it's usually to a humorous effect. And a pastoral is, so if you have pastoral imagery, that is referring to like country imagery. So a lot of times I'm thinking of like a field full of sheep and shepherds. And a pastoral, when it's describing a poem, a pastoral is a type of poem that is a country poem. So and I think that was a pretty popular question. Okay. Let me see if anyone else had something similar. Okay, so I'm just going to go through this. So what is an epistolary? That is a story that is told through the medium of letters. So if you've ever read Dracula, that is an example of an epistolary. That is told through the medium of letters, news reports, basically anything that is not direct prose and is not like a narrator telling a story. It's someone telling a story through those letters. So an epistle and epistolary are sometimes interchangeable, but epistolary, yeah. So I would say those are interchangeable. I would use those interchangeably. All right. Oh, I'll go to some of these in a moment. I think I answered that one. And I answered that one. And okay. Ooh, okay. I did not have this one. So the question is, what is a foil? A foil is a character that is put in direct contrast, usually to the protagonist. So I always like to give the example of Hamlet. You may or may not have read Hamlet. We have Hamlet, who's a character who can't can't act on what he desires, and Laertes is often thought of as his foil because Laertes has, I should say, an opposite character to highlight the protagonist's characteristics. So Hamlet can't act upon his desire, and his desire is to kill Claudius. Laertes comes home and immediately tries to kill Claudius. So the fact that Laertes immediately acts shows Hamlet's inability to act. Okay, I'll add that question. So that is what a foil is. All right, I don't have this one. So another question is, what is an allusion? An allusion is a reference to another text. Some of the most common ones are mythological allusions, like referring to any basically Greek or Roman mythology, so referring to like the Battle of Troy, or a biblical allusion, so anything that's like a Christ figure or something like that. So an allusion refers to another, usually very famous text. So one of the cool things that you can get, and I know that one of my teacher friends has, is a delusion of the day. And so things like, another one, it doesn't have to be Greek and Roman mythology. It can be things like crossing the Rubicon. So that's something that we use that's referring to Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon, and there's a whole history behind that. But so things that we say today that are referring to historical events as well. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Let's see. Some of these I have to remember myself. So give me a moment, because some of them are like, oh, I kind of know that, but I want to be able to explain it to you better. Okay. So I'm going to try to answer syllogism as best I can. That answer on there was on, that test was from like 1998. So hopefully they're like, I'm not going to use that one. So I got a question. What is a syllogism? So it's part of an argument when you're making an argument, and it applies deductive reasoning to get to a conclusion. So you've got two or more propositions that are asserted or assumed to be true. So it's in sets of, I'm trying to think of a good example for that. That's one, again, I'm not particularly familiar with, but that it goes with a type of argument, which if you see that in a poem, it kind of goes with being parallel as well. That's not a very good explanation. If I come up with a better explanation or example, I will give that to you. Let's see. So I have a question here, is anecdotal a literary device? So an anecdote is a literary device, yes. And so an anecdote is giving a personal story to explain something. So being anecdotal would describe like a tone or a mood. So yeah, so anecdote is a literary device for sure. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Okay, we have, let me make sure this is another one that I know, but I want to make sure I explain it well. Wait, it's here. I have it here. Yes. Okay, so the question is, what is an allegory? And an allegory is so generally it's a whole story. And so I'll give the example first for this. If you've ever read Animal Farm, Animal Farm is an allegory, and it's referring to a specific historical event or some other book. And so, for example, Animal Farm uses animals on a farm to describe the overthrow of the Russian government and the communist revolution. So it's a work that is not directly stating that it's referring to that, but it is definitely, like, if you read into it, you're like, oh, okay, that's totally referring to the Russian Revolution. Or a biblical allegory is, again, stories that refer directly to a biblical story or a Greek mythology. Yes, communism. Not Greek mythology, communism, but something, an allegory to communism. Okay, I think I've answered. Some of these are repeat questions, so don't feel bad if I do that. So some of these are already listed here. So I have some of these that I'll show you in on the PowerPoint itself. So let's go ahead and go to so the question here is, what is synecdoche? Give me a moment. I'll go straight to it because I don't want to spend too much time here. Oh, it's my second one. There we go. Synecdoche and metonymy. So these are related to each other. So here we go, synecdoche. So you probably wondered how that was pronounced too. So these wonderful Greek words, synecdoche and metonymy. So these are related to each other, as in metonymy, or synecdoche, I believe, is a type of metonymy. I kind of mix them up sometimes, but I think if you say metonymy, you're going to be right. So Metonymy is a figure of speech that consists of the use of the name of one object. The definition is a little bit confusing. You are using a figure of speech where a part is used to describe a whole, or a whole is used to describe a part. So I've got 3 examples. So one example, metonymy, is all the crowns of Europe. You're not literally, so all the crowns of Europe came together and met. You're not literally talking about that people took off their crowns and put them on a table and then they left the room and they met with each other. No, you're talking about all of the crowns are referring to the royalty of Europe. Or, for example, all hands on deck. So hands, you're not throwing off your hand and throwing it on the deck. That's creepy. No, the hands are referring to the people and the specific part that they use to actually work. So the part of the person is used to describe the whole person. We do this all the time. You see it in the news, especially, like, for example, the White House released a statement about blank. The White House itself, as in the house that is white that the president lives in, does not release a statement, but we use the term White House to describe, like, the presidential cabinet, or we say things like China released a report today on climate change. Like, China itself, the country, doesn't release it, but like the government of China does. So we use the word China, which is synecdoche, to describe we use the whole to describe the part. So that's synecdoche, metonymy. Those are often used interchangeably. Synecdoche is a type of metonymy. So if you want to use it, metonymy is your best bet, because that's the umbrella term. Oops, that is not the button I wanted to press. So hopefully that should be answered. All right, I answered that one before. We did that one, and we did extended metaphor. Yes, we did. Awesome. So let me go over, we're running over just a little bit. I do want to go over a couple more, not a couple more, well, I can go through them pretty quickly, so I want to make sure. A couple of things that I do want you to know, because they're used pretty often on the AP exam. So one of the things here, and I can go on forever about syntax. If it loads, go on, do it. There we go, syntax. So they'll ask you sometimes, you can use syntax on the exam. Syntax scares people. It's not that scary. It sounds like something from outer space, or it sounds like the error that you get on your computer. It's syntax error. Syntax is just the way that words are ordered in a sentence. So grammatical structure. So it can be sometimes interchangeably used with grammar. So it's the order of words and phrases in a sentence. All sentences you use have syntax, and it can be broken into different types. There's the simple sentence, which is subject, verb, object, and then really more complex syntactic structures. One of those being things like parallelism is a type of syntax. What else is a type of syntax? I have some other examples. Syntax is always tied to tone. So if you have your tone, then you can describe someone's tone by the way that they order words. I think that's it for that one. And then there was a couple others. No, I don't need to do litotes. Litotes is a cool one, but I won't do that. I want to get you out of here on time, or close to on time. Okay, things to remember too, because a lot of my kids don't remember this. So, irony. Irony, so I always like to tell my kids on the first day of AP Literature is all roads lead to tone and irony. If you can figure out the tone of a piece, you can figure out what it means, or you have already figured out what it means. And if you can figure out if a tone is being ironic, or if an author is being ironic, then you can figure out also what they mean. So once you figure out someone's being ironic, then you know their tone. Their tone is irony. They don't like it, or they're trying to change it, or they're going for humorous effects. So there's 3 different types as a review. So you have verbal irony that says the opposite of what you mean. So that's something like, oh, I feel fabulous today. But knowing my tone of voice, and in this case, you might have the italics here that says, like, they might indicate like this person might be being sarcastic or ironic. People will usually use sarcastic to describe this. It's technically verbal irony. Sarcasm is being intentionally mean towards somebody, but it's usually verbal irony too. Then situational irony is when you expect one outcome and the opposite happens. So, and that outcome has to be directly related to what the thing was that caused it in the first place. So it can't be something like it rained on my wedding day. That's not situational irony. That's just really unfortunate. I'm sorry that happened. Or maybe you like that. I don't know. Such as a bulletproof window causes someone to be shot. The bulletproof window was supposed to protect them from it, but it caused them to be shot. This actually happened to Ronald Reagan, fun fact. And then dramatic irony, which is one that a lot of people know verbal and situational, but they don't know dramatic irony, or they don't remember it, is that when the reader or audience knows something that the characters in a work do not. So this happens all the time when you're watching TV. You're like, oh my God, don't go in that room, because you know that there's a monster there. That's dramatic irony. Or if you've read Oedipus Rex, and if you haven't, you should, because it's really disturbing. The audience knows that Oedipus killed his dad and married his mom, but Oedipus doesn't find out until the end. But the entire time you're reading the play, you're like, oh my God, this is disgusting, and he doesn't realize it. So that's the fun part. Greeks love dramatic irony. All right. Let me see if there's anything else that I wanted to make sure I go over. No. Okay. So those are the ones that I think I got through your questions. Let me make sure no one else has a question. I don't think so. Okay, cool. So like I said, I've got a huge list, and I've got some cheat sheets of different literary devices for, if you are on Fiveable, if you're subscribed to Fiveable, you can get those resources. Last week's also had resources as well, some good websites and some resources made by me that I gave to my kids. As a reminder, so next week it will not be me, alas, but it'll be Nadiria Wade, who is also awesome. She's going to talk about annotating for analysis, so that may help you with annotating and getting literary devices out of your reading. And then I'll be back in 2 weeks talking about how to break down an AP Lit prompt. So that'll be fun times, and we'll do some examples there. Once again, last week I gave information, so if you ever have a question, particular one, or I'm on Twitter as Miss Walbach. I'm also laurawaltonteacher@gmail.com. And again, if you are not subscribed to Fiveable, do so. It is great. It is worth your while. That is it for me. If there's any, I say a final question. Let's see what we got here. So where do you get resources? So you get resources. I'm going to type this in the chat. You can get resources at fiveable.me from me. So if you subscribe, subscribe to fiveable.me, you are able to access this live stream and any other live stream from any other time. And you are able to attach to that our resources that have the links to the resources. So, and another question is, when will this video be up for replay? It should be up for replay either, I know that I have to put it up to within 24, so it should be up within 24 hours, if not within 48 hours on fiveable.me. Other questions? So I went slightly over, but I did not go too much over. You are welcome. Thank you guys for coming out tonight and spending your wonderful Thursday evening with me. I do enjoy talking with you. And I will see you I will hopefully see you with Nadiria, but I'll see y'all in 2 weeks. Bye. Have a wonderful, wonderful Friday and weekend.